Developing the knight early often prepares for a central pawn push or allows quick castling. Mirroring your opponent's intent, this immediately establishes a symmetrical foothold, often leading to transpositional possibilities. Establishing central dominion with pawns, preparing for a flexible English opening setup. Opening the d-file for the queen and bishop, this pawn advance prepares to challenge the center and control key squares. Establishing a solid central pawn presence, preparing to unleash piece development. Securing the knight's retreat and supporting an eventual e5 push solidifies black's central ambitions. Developing the kingside fianchetto, g3 subtly prepares to control the long diagonal and potentially shore up the kingside. Seizing the center immediately challenges white's ambitions and opens lines for dynamic play. Developing the bishop to its most active diagonal aims to pressure black's central control and prepare for potential pawn pushes. Developing the bishop to its most natural square, this piece prepares to castle and supports central control, contributing to a solid defensive setup. Casting the king to safety secures a crucial cornerstone of the position, paving the way for central pawn expansion. Securing the monarch amidst the growing central storm solidifies the nascent defensive structure. Developing this knight to its natural outpost solidifies control over the central squares and prepares for further pawn advances in the d-file. Solidifying the pawn chain, black prepares to reinforce the center and possibly launch a kingside advance. Seizing central space aggressively, this advance initiates a dynamic pawn battle and challenges black's kingside development. Anchoring the queen to the center offers solid defense while preparing for future queenside expansion. Securing the kingside and preventing immediate pawn storms grants white breathing room for queenside expansion. Solidifying the e-file is a sensible, albeit passive, choice for black. Developing the bishop here prepares to challenge black's central pawn structure and adds another piece to the kingside initiative. Repositioning the knight to f8 aims to support the d6 pawn and potentially redeploy for queenside action, a subtle but purposeful maneuver. Establishing influence over the open c-file, this rook now eyes potential pawn breaks or tactical incursions. Preventing bg5 prevents a knight retreat, solidifying pawn structure while preparing for potential kingside expansion. Opening the d-file decisively, this gambit sacrifices pawn structure for immediate kingside pressure and potential central dominance. Establishing a solid diagonal for the bishop, this retreats it from immediate threats and prepares for potential queenside expansion later. A strategic retreat, clearing the d-file for potential pawn advances and preparing to reroute the knight to a more active square. Unleashing a pawn storm on the kingside signals an aggressive intent to create weaknesses around white's castled king. Initiating a bold pawn storm on the kingside, challenging black's consolidated central structure and aiming for a decisive attack. Unleashing the g-file creates immediate attacking prospects, though it opens up kingside weaknesses if black isn't careful. Opening the g-file creates immediate pressure but weakens the king's defense. Be mindful of counterplay. The king boldly ventures forward, seeking active participation rather than passive defense. Opening that kingside offers a strategic pawn thrust, creating dynamic imbalances and potentially weakening the black king's shelter. Reclaiming the central pawn injects fresh dynamism, but the open king position offers white immediate attacking avenues. Opening the c-file now creates immediate pressure and forces a decision about pawn structure. Exposing your king now invites immediate tactical fireworks with piece exchanges. Exploiting the open c-file, this knight's advance immediately threatens the queen and aims to unravel black's pawn structure. Shifting the queen to c6 immediately challenges the advanced knight and aims to exploit the opened queenside files. The knight embarks on an ambitious journey, seeking to destabilize the pawn chain and exploit the open d-file. The knight's repositioning to g6 aims to reinforce the kingside and prepare for potential central breaks, but it leaves the e5 pawn exposed to immediate pressure. Prying open the center with this knight challenges black's defensive structure. Disengaging the attacked bishop reestablishes piece coordination and prepares for a potential kingside pawn push. Liberating the queen's bishop with this exchange opens new attacking avenues, but also creates a dynamic imbalance on the d-file. Initiating a fascinating tactical skirmish, black reclaims a central pawn, aiming to untangle their pieces and activate the otherwise passive knight. Unleashing a decisive rook sacrifice, white aims to shatter black's defensive pawn structure and expose the king. The black king is now exposed, inviting immediate tactical follow-up to exploit the open files. Unleashing the queen into the heart of black's shattered kingside, white seeks to exploit the exposed monarch and disrupt any defensive coordination. Surrendering the kingside pawns in exchange for potential counterplay on the open files seems to be the gamble here. Unleashing the knight to disrupt black's weakened king and potentially seize the open f-file. Unleashing the rook on the open file is a bold, albeit risky, counter to white's aggressive queen. Unleashing a calculated sacrifice, white exploits the exposed black monarch, aiming to shatter the defensive shield surrounding the king. Black gambles on a pawn, desperately seeking counterplay against white's overwhelming pressure on the kingside. Asserting dominance on the open d-file, this rook transfer aims to exploit black's vulnerable king and precarious pawn structure. Reactivating the rooks on the d-file aims to contest control of this open highway and disrupt white's dominant queen placement. Unleashing the queen forces a concession, opening diagonals for domination and exploiting the exposed king's dire situation. The king abandons a precarious shelter, seeking refuge deeper into the chaotic center. Clearing the king's path, this rook sacrifice aims to expose the black monarch and open lines for a decisive attack. Sacrificing the pawn to pry open the kingside pawns was a bold, but ultimately unsound, tactical gamble. Sacrificing the rook to gain an unstoppable passed pawn on the 6th rank simplifies into a winning material advantage. Gambiting a piece here aims to disrupt white's queen and rook coordination, opening avenues for counterplay. Unleashing the queen's attack on the exposed king is paramount.